contest to be selected, and she's selected as the most fair and beautiful, and she goes off to be the queen. Well, lo and behold, the Jews, like many times in their history, live in the kingdom but have different ways of living. And so Haman is elevated in the king's inner circle, and he decides that he's going to get rid of all the Jews and gets the king to agree to issue a decree that they'll all be killed. And Esther's a Jew and Mordecai's a Jew, and so in chapter 5, she risks her life by going into the inner court of the king without being invited. You did not do that without being invited, and so she risks her life to go and ask the king to come to her feast. And the king says yes, and so we pick up today in the second day of the feast. And the second day, Esther has the courage to say, you know, you're about to kill my people. It'd be really nice if you didn't kill my people. And she admits that she's a Jew and Mordecai is a Jew, and she saves her people and sends Haman to the guillotine. So I'm really struck by her courage, because the first queen is banished because she doesn't listen to the king and doesn't follow his orders, and she could risk the same kind of banishment, but she has the courage and doesn't face that kind of retribution. So she's a remarkable woman who gets a chance because of her beauty. But mainly today I want to talk about Jesus, because that's why we're all here, isn't it? We come to follow Jesus and to learn from Jesus. And we think about his courage by being willing to die on the cross, but I've spent a lot more time ever since we've been focusing on John 6. Remember that long 5 Sundays where we hear the bread of life sermon? I bet most of you were here for that. And Jesus is the bread of life, and we go on and talk about stuff. And I was struck by, most of us think of communion as the Last Supper, the thing that Jesus does right before he dies. But in the book of John, it comes in the middle of Jesus' ministry. It comes in the middle. So it's not like the Last Supper. It's about, I'm giving you this meal so that you can live. Jesus is more about living and dying. So I've been thinking more and more about what I've learned from Jesus about how to live. And so I want to talk a little bit. Most of us in our culture don't understand the way things were in the time of Jesus. Jesus, the ancient Middle Eastern world was an honor society. Now, has anyone heard of honor killings? Has anyone heard of honor killings? When people in their family kill someone, it's often a young woman, is killed because she brings dishonor to her family. Someone in Buffalo, sometimes I listen to WBFO, and someone in Buffalo was accused of killing his daughter or wife because she brought some dishonor to her family. So in the time of Jesus, honor was the very most important thing that a person wanted, especially for men, but also for women. You wanted to have honor. And in America, you get honor by doing the right thing. You're seen as a person of honor and being honorable because you have integrity and you do the right thing. But in the time of Jesus, it wasn't necessarily what you did, but how other people saw what you did that brought you honor. Honor was a socially acknowledged claim to worth. So if you did something that a lot of people thought was great, then you had a lot of worth. And that's what you wanted to do. You wanted to move up in that kind of honor society. You want to move up in the hierarchy. You want to be the person who's invited to the dinner. You want to be the person who's invited to things. You want to be the master. You want to control other people. You want to have servants who serve you. That all brings you honor. So you can see so easily how Jesus is countercultural. Remember the person who has the wedding banquet, and then those people don't come? And so all these people who weren't invited, Jesus invite, in the story, Jesus goes out and just invites everybody, which would have been just scandalous in Jesus' time to invite anybody. Yeah, you want to invite people of honor so you have more honor. And Jesus actually is getting honor because when he goes out and preaches, there's a lot of people who listen to him. And so that brings him honor, but he's not here to get honor. He's here to teach us a different way of living. And so when he says, as he did last week, you need to become a servant, that is not what you wanted to be in an honor society. Servants were at the bottom of the totem pole, bottom of the hierarchy. So when he encourages us to serve, he is going against the culture that he lives in. He is so completely countercultural. And you probably don't understand this, but this is also really important. In the time of Jesus, children weren't worth anything. They were like non-entities. Children, do you hear this? That's why when Jesus welcomes the children, it's so important, because in the time of Jesus, children did not have honor. They could not gain honor. They were not people who could master things over or lord it over people, so they just sort of like didn't exist. So they didn't exist. So when Jesus says you should welcome children and you should be like a child, he's saying something that is so completely out of place that when Christians started following this way, and in the early church, people weren't called Christians, they were called people of the way, people who followed Jesus a different way. There was great social pressure to get back in line. If you've ever done anything that has forced you, has brought other people's criticism to get back in line. There are horrible stories of people who speak up about abuse, who are just kind of silenced and told to be quiet or will take away your scholarship. I read about an author who got a scholarship to Stanford, and it was in I think the early 70s, and he was part of the group that took over the president's house or something, and they said, well, you're out of here. You know, he lost his scholarship and couldn't continue school. There was all this pressure to act. We have special laws to protect whistleblowers because so oftentimes if you speak up, you get in trouble. I suspect that's part of the problem in the church. I grew up with a mother who always spoke up when things needed to be said, and I am her daughter, and so sometimes she probably should be quiet, and I haven't been. We had a bishop who is now retired and who just had a very hard time with gay people. I don't think he ever experienced knowing anyone who was different than he was. And I went to seminary in Berkeley. I lived in New York City. So I met many Christians who were incredibly faithful, who saw, whose sexual life was different than mine. It didn't affect how they were Christians, but I know it bothered the bishop a great deal. So we come today, as so many Sundays, to understand how Jesus sees the world. And when he's crucified on the cross, that is like the biggest, that is the best way to bring dishonor to a person and to put them down, is to force them to die on the cross. I mean, it's one thing to kill them, but it's another thing to have such public humiliation. And Jesus is willing to do that because he came to teach us the way of God's kingdom. And so that's why this is so crucial. So in today's gospel, where we come to the place that says, if anyone causes someone to stumble, that's bad news, because there's all this social pressure for people to behave the way the society wants them, and Jesus is inviting them in a different way. And that's why we have this hyperbole. Jesus does not intend you to cut off your hand. Jesus does not want you to cut off your foot, but he's trying to get your attention. It's a pretty striking way to get your attention, isn't it? If your foot's causing you trouble, cut it off. Please don't do that. I don't want anyone right now to do that. But he's trying to get our attention, because to live as a Christian is to live differently, is to see the world differently, is to see the big picture, to understand that this is God's creation, that we are a part of it, that everyone is here together as part of God's kingdom, to see people of color and people who come to our southern border as fellow people on the, fellow brothers and sisters in the world, is a big challenge. Fred Craddock, when Jesus says we are to be salt, that's because you need salt to make the, anyone who goes without salt for a while knows how valuable salt is to the world and to many people, especially me. I love a lot of salt because I like flavor, and so we are called to bring that to the world. Fred Craddock has this great illustration. When people decide to follow Jesus, they say that they give you, here God, you can have $1,000, you can have $10,000. And Fred says, he's a famous preacher, famous Christian preacher, he says, God gives all that money back to you in quarters. God gives it back to you in quarters to be out spending it by how you act every day. And so I came here today to encourage you to spend your quarters lavishly by acts of justice and kindness and courage. I saw in your library some books by Max Lucado. I'm not sure I know how to speak his name, but I have this wonderful tattered Advent devotion from him. And in one of the pages he says, be the one who speaks up on behalf of others. Be the one who doesn't have an affair. Be the one who does this and that. And I just want to end my sermon today with, be the one who reduces their plastic consumption to save our ocean and our animals who live there. Be the one who walks or bikes or doesn't drive to save our home. Be the one who spends their 25 cents every day by acting righteously, generously, speaking up for others. Be the one who follows Jesus.